Welcome. Today is part 5 of the nervous system, and we're going to be going over pages 9 and 10 of your nervous system notes. That includes the cerebrum and the structures, a little bit more on the functions though, and all the lobes and what each area kind of does. We've already covered neurons, we've already covered brainstem, we've already covered kind of basic structures of the brain. And we've already covered a little bit in the inner brain as well as the brain stem kind of functions too. Okay, so we're going to focus on the cerebrum today. That's the big walnut thinking part of the brain that's divided into 4 lobes. It's separated into the right and left hemispheres by the longitudinal fissure. Kind of talked about that. It definitely divides the brain into the left and right sides. And you can tell actually left and right do different things. But if you cut it down farther and try to divide it down farther, you're going to be getting into other structures like the corpus callosum and some inner brain stuff. Okay, so if you pull the 2 hemispheres apart, that thick band is the 200 million myelinated axons and dendrites. We call that, like we just said, the corpus callosum. It's the head, it's really big. Callosum. This is what we call the wiring between the left and right sides, and enables the right side of the brain to know what the left side's thinking about and processing. The surface of the cerebrum, we call that the cerebral cortex. Which I like to think of as the crust. It's made up of gray matter. And remember, gray matter are the cell bodies of the neurons of the brain. And deep to the gray matter is going to be that white matter. And that's going to be the myelinated axons and dendrites. That's kind of like the wiring as well, where the neurons like talk to each other. And it connects different lobes to each other and different parts of the brains to each other. But the thinking part really and the processing is done at the gray matter, because that's where the cell bodies can modify a response, decide to send a response out somewhere else, access other memories, do other kinds of communication processing. So I guess that's what really does the thinking. Now we're going to talk about the basal ganglia. That's those paired masses of gray matter within the white matter of the hemispheres. These work on the cerebellum, or they work with the cerebellum, to do some subconscious aspects of voluntary movement. So the cerebellum gets accessed when needed by this basal ganglia. Things like swinging your arms as you walk. That's like coordination while you're doing something else. Or gesturing while speaking. These are called accessory movements, kind of like walking and chewing gum at the same time. So we kind of really associate them with coordination while you're not thinking about it, you know. Folds in the cerebrum are called the gyri, and the grooves between them are called the sulci. This folding increases surface area, which is really important because we want more surface area of the cerebral cortex, because it allows the presence of millions of more neurons and their subbodies, of course. This is what makes us human. There's some other critters on this planet, and they don't have as much surface area, and so they don't do as much higher level thinking, assumedly. The cerebrum is divided into lobes. Each is named the same name as the cranial bone external to them, so that's kind of nice. All right. So we got a nice little picture here of the frontal lobe with your little eyeballs would be out front here, you know. The parietal lobe, this is just the right one. There's also a left one. And the occipital lobe in the back. And then this little guy here is the temporal lobe. Of course, that's the right temporal lobe because we have a left temporal lobe. So there's 4 lobes, but a couple of them are paired, okay? Remember the parietal lobe up here, you know, the Katy Perry. All right. And then this picture is going to show you some more specific areas that we're going to talk about in a second. Okay, so we'll come back to this picture. Remind me to come back to this picture. Okay. The frontal lobes, they contain the motor areas of the cerebral cortex. So sometimes people group all of these things and say, well, this is the motor area. Primary motor cortex generates impulse for voluntary movement. That's movement that you are conscious, aware of, and that you want to do. The largest portions are devoted to movements of hands and face. Right? Because we have a lot of small, fine motor movement and lots of inflection in your face, and that's important for communicating and what makes us human also. The left side controls the right side of the body and vice versa. Okay. Premotor areas, these areas are concerned with learned motor skills. Okay. So skills that require like sequential movement, tying shoes, riding a bike. Once we've learned the sequence, then we can repeat it, hopefully without thinking about every step. Okay. The prefrontal cortex, this is very important in social behavior. It's concerned with appropriate response, understanding that there are standards of behavior and following them, anticipating and planning for the future. And as you can see, there's some discussion about the prefrontal cortex because it's the farthest in the front, and maybe it does the most complex type of processing, and it's not always engaged yet and not always developed yet in children. So you can see maybe they might have trouble like being like, well, why do I not hit Johnny? Or, why do I need a plan? Tomorrow's tomorrow, So those are important. The prefrontal cortex is important for maturing and being able to function in the adult world and allowing us to get along with others as well. So we treat others how we would want to be treated, right? So yeah, that's that. Also, I believe that there's a working short-term memory here, which kind of didn't get in my notes here. So short-term memory involved with this lobe here, this area. So like your RAM, I guess. Cool. So the next is the Broca's motor speech area. This controls movement of the mouth while speaking, and as well as like the face, expression, I should say, expression while speaking. Yeah, face area is more primary motor cortex. So Broca's motor speech area. Yeah, it's weird if this gets damaged. The person wants to say something, knows what they want to say, but they can't get it out. I've heard of a guy being injured in this area, but really oddly enough, he could still sing. I don't know. So that's kind of interesting. Now I put this over here, the gustatory cortex, but it's really not in the frontal lobe now. We've decided we're calling it in its separate lobe. So I guess we now have 5 lobes. Okay. New things we're discovering. So really the gustatory cortex, we need to put that in the insular lobes. It's in there. It's like can't see it as well on the outside. But if you had to say where the insular lobe is, it's like insulated. There's kind of this fissure here, parietal-temporal fissure, I guess. And if you take this and pull it back, there's some more gray matter under there, and that's the insular lobe. So I don't have a super great picture of that. But, okay, all that to say that the gustatory cortex is having to do with taste, the taste buds, and processing taste, okay? But you and I know that taste is very much associated with smell. Like 80% of your taste is associated with smell. So you do have like the sweet, salty, bitter, sour, those tastes, right? So if you plugged your nose, you could still taste with that gustatory cortex. Okay, more on that later. We're going to go down to between the frontal lobe and the parietal lobe to the frontotemporal parietal cortex. Okay, so yeah, you saw we just added the O there to join two words. That's fun. Maybe you can think of other things that you would want to join together. That's where numerical computation, or our favorite subject, math. Interestingly enough, the left side deals with larger numbers, and the right side processes smaller numbers. I heard that it's actually just like 1 through 9 for the smaller numbers. So everything larger is like 10 and above. Okay. So now, we're on the parietal lobes. Here's an interesting thing. Now we're calling things somatosensory. Somato is just Greek for body. So I just thought that was interesting. Like, that's kind of a newer thing, and I don't know how new that is, but I just know older textbooks didn't put that in there. So that's the body area, I guess. In this case, the primary somatosensory area of the parietal lobe. They deal with sensory. So you're going to be receiving the impulse from your sensory neurons from the skin. Oh gosh, that didn't leave me a big enough line. That's okay. From the skin, and it feels and interprets these, probably need S there, sensations. Again, the left side of the body interprets information for the right, and the right side vice versa. So yeah, same deal, but this is just sensory. These areas also receive impulses from your stretch receptors in the muscles. And we talked about those a little bit. For conscious muscle sense. Okay, so we do have some reflexes that just go straight to the spine and out for that stretch reflex, but this one's more fine-tuned and more complex to get the whole body to work, so that we're much more coordinated and standing up and not swaying around, I guess. Again, more surface area in the cerebral cortex is devoted to areas of the hands and face. Right? Because we have the greatest density of receptors there, I guess. Yeah, so that we can really feel. We have lots of good sense of touch, so that we can manipulate things better. Yeah, and we're doing a lot with our face. So it's good to know what your face is doing. That's also, like, are you conscious of what your face is doing? That might be the sensory association areas where we understand and learn the meaning of sensations. So, yeah. Like, it's probably a mosquito, something like that. Then you hit yourself in the face. Stuff like that you got to learn and finally hone as an infant. Make those connections. We're probably going to interpret these a little differently because we're different people. This is what makes us unique. The way we interpret information might lead to our development of personalities, sense of humor, ability to reason, use logic, learn form memories, and stuff like that. So, yeah, this is kind of, some of it's a little bit genetic and, nature versus nurture. We'll see which one is more important. You always have those kids, though, that like running their little toy cars into the brick wall, or, like running into a brick wall. Maybe they have less sensors. Pain sensors. I don't know. Okay, so I had to change my notes, so please bear with me because there's things that have been updated. Oh my gosh, this is great. They've made advances. We're going to jump to the temporal lobe then. And one is the primary olfactory cortex. Okay, so I think of olfactory as the good old olfactory that they like put out a lot of smell. They're probably not great for the environment, right? So, we have we call it the stink factory. It's a paper mill near us. Anyway, so remember, that's the sense of smell. It receives impulses from that olfactory bulb. That's at the base of the brain there. And in turn, that has received impulses, where are we at? From the nasal cavities. Yes, that's where we are. And give us the sense of smell. The olfactory bulb runs along the base of the brain, connecting to the amygdala, through the amygdala and hippocampus, which could be why smells are so successful for triggering stored memories. And feelings. Yeah. So yeah, they say if you're studying, you should have like a certain smell, and then you should smell that smell before your test. Okay, so maybe that works. Of course, if you become easily nose blind, like your anatomy teacher, maybe that doesn't work so good. Yeah. Anyway, the next one we're gonna talk about is the primary olfactory association areas. Those are where things or learned meanings of the odors are stored. So this is where your sense of where you've developed this over the years, which is why the thinking cerebrum is able to use information effectively, because we've stored those memories in the association areas. Now we're going to talk about hearing, and we're auditory. Primary auditory cortex. So that makes sense that temporal region would be dealing with smell and with hearing, because it's right there, right? Temporal regions. But the auditory cortex receives impulses from the inner ear for hearing. And it's going to also determine like pitch, and it's matching pitch, determining volume, and being able to kind of locate sounds and stuff like that. The auditory association cortex, part of it, of course, is for interpreting the meanings of words. And interpreting these sounds and stored memories associated. Okay. Next we have the Wernicke's area. And some people call it the Wernicke area. I don't know why, there's no R there, but that's okay. I had to move this area because it's in the temporal lobe. I guess we've decided now. But it does tend to kind of squish over a little bit in the parietal lobe, okay? This is involved with, where did I put it? Syntax, speech. So we can't speak without it. That's what goes there. And it's arrangement of words and sounds and sentence structure, and it enables us to speak and comprehend oral and written language. Also involved with verbal memory, so just being able to remember words. So these aren't necessarily super functional with babies. They're kind of doing sounds and stuff like that, but they're developing it. It's getting developed, and it's good for children to learn by hearing the same word thousands of times and get those really strong connections. Also, it's important for kids to be exposed to different languages. They say that you'll be able to distinguish different languages better if you've heard those types of sounds, because some languages have their own kind of specific ways of stringing together the sounds, consonants, vowels, even special sounds. So the more the better, they say. Talk to your kids before they're even born, and we will highly develop this area, and it will really help them. Now, long-term memory is weird. Retention memories occur over a period of time through that area. And so I want to emphasize, just looking at something once or twice or even 3 times, that's not necessarily going to store it in your long-term memory. That's why we have to study and go over your notes. They say daily and then study for the test, because you do need to be able to store it long-term. You're going to need that reinforcement, okay? This area, though, we've identified it more on the floor of the lateral ventricle. We call that the hippocampus. Yes, we've kind of talked a little bit about that hippocampus. And we used to think that the hippocampus is where memories are stored, but no, this is I guess it's called the seahorse-shaped region. Hippo actually meaning horse, and campus for like the sea. So it's the seahorse-shaped region. Fun. It's believed to consolidate, store, and access information from many areas of the cerebral cortex. So it really does more, it's like a gateway for memories and consolidation, and taking that reinforcement and maybe making it go long term and keep those memories. So we meet a friend, even though it's like stored, it's organized by the hippocampus, so that hopefully all the memories of that friend will kind of come back. Hopefully their name too. All right, I'm great at facial recognition. The names. I mean, I didn't get that developed so good. I don't know why. So yeah, people with the hippocampus damage cannot form new memories that last even more than a second. So it's super important for memory, hippocampus. So you can remember that. Maybe you can remember that a hippo really means horse, and elephants are really close to horses and elephants. Like, remember a lot? I don't know. They say it's seahorse shaped, okay? But it curls around on either side, and that's kind of a cutaway of the brain. I'm not seeing it. Okay, sorry. I think it just curls in another region that I can't see. That's fine. Okay, the next area we kind of already mentioned a little bit. We mentioned it when we first started talking about the hypothalamus and the inner brain, and that's the limbic association area. So here it is. Here it is in our notes before there. It's down at the base of the brain, but it's like a system of little areas that control instinct, mood, basic emotions, fear, pleasure, anger, drives, hunger, sex, dominance, care of offspring. So some good instincts there. Structures involved are hypothalamus, thalamus, which are part of the inner brain, the amygdala, hippocampus, we just talked about, basal ganglia, also cingulate gyrus, which is involved with emotional processing behavior. So we kind of already mentioned it. I don't know, I accidentally put it here too, I guess. So we've also have to mention there's some mammillary bodies there, so some other gray matter areas, and the stria medullaris and various nuclei of the Gooden. Okay, I'm not going into those. Those are for your higher level anatomy courses, but they're just saying that they relay info to other structures, and they're all working together and in these basic kind of drives. If you have a really well developed amygdala, I've been told that you have a very strong sense of fear. Okay, maybe anxiety. Maybe that's good. Maybe that protects you and helps you defend yourself in the wild. I don't know. You poor thing, if that's the problem. Sorry. Limbic structures, though, we talked about all of these, and limbic structure also, or association area, also works to get information from the prefrontal cortex. Okay, and we talked about olfactory bulbs, how that's kind of tied into there and can activate certain emotions and memory, and the basal ganglia we talked about as well too. Okay, so that's kind of what we're going to talk about with that. There's one thing that I did not put on here, and I need to, and that's the fact that the vestibular cortex is also in the area of insula. So I know I put the gustatory cortex down here. I just want to put a little thing on here. The vestibular cortex. Okay, I know I didn't get it on here yet. It's conscious awareness of balance, okay? I know we talked about balance and the cerebellum and stuff like that, but we do need that vestibular cortex, which is receiving information from the ear and all these, vestibular, those loops, and they tell you like where gravity-wise you are in association with those loops. You can study the ear a little bit more, but just remember that vestibular portion of the brain that's in the insular lobe, and that kind of deals with processing those neurons that are, and sensory neurons that are in your inner ear for balance. Okay, so vestibular cortex, conscious awareness of balance, and works with the inner ear. I don't know if you can squeeze that in there, but it's something that we just decided to kind of add in these notes. Okay, last but not least, as far as the lobes go, the occipital lobe that's in the back, they knew for a long time that that's kind of, if you get hit in the back of the head, it's lights out for your eyesight. So eyesight's really, visual processing occurs back there. So primary visual cortex receives impulses that originate in the retina of the eyes, so that's sensory data, and then travels along the base of the brain through the optic nerve, really optic nerves, one left and one right, and these areas will then connect to the primary visual cortex in the occipital lobe, and that's where you see, okay? But we also need this visual association area, and that's, of course, where like learned memories are stored so you can interpret what is seen and enable thinking cerebrum to use that information and access past memories. Yes. Spatial relationships are also interpreted in the occipital lobes. These areas allow us to judge distance and see in 3D. And they give us the ability to relate what we see to the real world. So if you've never seen before, you don't know what you're looking at. You could be looking at a tree and you're just like, wow, I don't know what's going on here. So hopefully you can get, your infant that hasn't been able to see, you can get that fixed as soon as possible so your brain can adapt and learn. So speaking of learning and adapting, your cerebral cortex has a unique characteristic. Now we're calling it neuroplasticity. So when you think of plasticity, that kind of means that things can be bent and changed. It seems that we actually do have the ability to adapt and change. Neurons can alter themselves. That's what goes there. Ooh, my pencil gave out. To do different jobs if needed. So I guess your book had given an example of a person who was born blind, and the occipital lobe neurons, they weren't being used. So their job changed and actually became more auditory areas. Sorry. Extra auditory areas to enhance his ability to interpret sounds and in hearing. So they have usually enhanced hearing if they're born blind or become blind. Plasticity is high in the younger brain, of course, and becomes a little less plastic as you age, but it still exists. So you can keep learning and you can keep growing. That's the whole premise of that growth mindset, that if you believe, hey, I can't do this, but I just can't do it yet, my brain can grow and adapt, and I'll get neurons, whether it's a physical task or learned mental processing, cognitive skill, or all of it, can eventually, you can work towards it. And that's what we're trying to remind people, that having that positive mindset encourages us to pursue it. And yeah, it's possible because we have an amazing brain. Thank you for joining us today for these notes. I hope they were helpful. Ask questions. Hopefully you'll private message me and I can answer them. Also, please comment if there are things that are erroneous in this, because things have changed, and what we have, nothing's really changed exactly in the brain. It's just the science of what we knew has changed a little bit. So I tried to keep things updated, and I hope you're having a great day, and stay tuned till next time. We're going to go over the cranial nerves, and we're going to go over some autonomic and involuntary motor systems and aspect of development in the nervous system. All right, see you then.